Welcome to C-Suite Blueprint Radio, conversations with communications strategy consultant and author Ed Barks and his guests. C-Suite Blueprint Radio serves as a practical resource for senior communications and government relations executives who counsel their C-suite leaders. Our goal? To help you achieve your business and public policy goals. Now, here's your host, Ed Barks.
Today I'm talking with Jonathan Salant, Washington correspondent for New Jersey Advance Media. Jonathan is also the president of the Regional Reporters Association. The association consists of journalists who cover the nation's capital for their hometown newspapers, both print and online. Its website notes that members help each other without compromising competition. Today's topic on C-Suite Blueprint Radio: what communicators need to know relative to the current state of regional newspapers and the reporters who work there. Jonathan, welcome.
Glad to be here.
Define for us first what a regional reporter is.
Well, we're looking for stories of interest to our readers, uniquely to our readers. It's we're not covering the White House press conference except when you get a chance to ask him, as Tommy Burr once did from the Salt Lake Tribune, asked President Trump to comment on Mitt Romney not supporting him. That's the local story for his newspaper. When President Trump went after New Jersey because of the coronavirus, that was a story for me. But when he brings out Dr. Fauci, we're not covering it. There's 18,000 wire services and television networks that can cover that, and we don't have to do that.
And what is the trend with regard to the number of regional reporters? It's
gone really down. Since I've been in Washington for 3 decades, several major news organizations, Cox, Copley, the Ottawa chain of Dow Jones, even my own chain of Newhouse, have closed their Washington bureaus, and we just have a handful of reporters left. Well, I think we had 200 when we started Regional Reporters Association in 1989, and now we have 60.
And the first wave of downsizing was the closing of regional newspaper offices in Washington, D.C., essentially forcing reporters to work from home or elsewhere. And then came outright layoffs. What's next?
Well, even when they closed the bureaus, all those people didn't find other jobs. Very rarely were individual reporters allowed to stay and keep their jobs. At Newhouse, 3 reporters or 3 newspapers kept their Washington reporters on. But I know Cox, only the Atlanta Journal-Constitution has a reporter now. Copley, none of the papers kept anybody. Ottawa, none of the papers kept anybody. Thompson, none of the papers kept anybody. So there were a lot of people just didn't get the reporters anymore. What happens is, since then, is a lot of the newspapers, as they're doing further cuts, are eliminating the Washington jobs.
So what about the impact on our democracy, given the lessening oversight of our government by a free press?
Well, I always thought of my job is you have a congressperson up in the home state, and when he or she leaves that home state and comes to Washington, who's watching that person? That's our job, is to tell the public what their public officials are doing so they can make a educated decision on election day. And if nobody's covering these lawmakers, then you don't know what they're doing except what they tell you. And I always say we have like space at the Capitol, and we can work for free at the Capitol to facilitate our access to watch these lawmakers in action. And that's the most important thing we can do. The First Amendment gives us the responsibility to hold public officials accountable. And if you're not there, it's hard to hold them accountable.
So what is a news consumer to do, given the fact that you're not there covering the congressional delegation and the bureaus as appropriate on a day-to-day basis?
Well, some of it is to just check other news sources. Obviously check out their press releases, but also, there are interest groups that are rating people. That's all online. You have a chance to see how they vote and what their positions are on key issues. There are groups like GovTrack that follows these lawmakers, how many bills they've introduced, how many bills they've passed. The Federal Election Commission and the Center for Responsive Politics tracks how much money they've raised and who gives to them. The Center for Responsive Politics, that's opensecrets.org, talks about the cash constituents, and you can see who are funding the lawmakers in office and where they're getting their money from, and frankly, who they're taking the phone calls from.
It must be somewhat painful for you and other journalists to see that dwindling of resources in newsrooms in the nation's capital, because now you've got to depend on other sources. For consumers actually need to actively go somewhere else as opposed to picking up a newspaper or turning on the, looking at their tablet on the website. It's got to be a kind of a body blow to journalism.
Well, there are at least other news sources down here. I mean, there was no Politico 10 years ago. And that's a major news organization. No Axios 10 years ago. And while they're not doing the in-the-weeds journalism we are of tracking particular lawmakers, they are covering the Congress or federal government from a higher perspective. But if your lawmaker is a player, at least you get a chance. Bob Menendez, the top Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, I don't cover that aspect of him. I have too much to cover. I'm covering 14 lawmakers. But there are groups and people who specialize in foreign affairs, and he's a major player in that. So that's a chance for you to go on the internet and see what he's doing that I'm not covering. And he gets that type of exposure that he wouldn't get otherwise with the other news sources. Frankly, it was even worse than Washington, state governments. There are no new groups, or very few, a couple of nonprofits now, but state governments especially are being uncovered, and state legislators are being uncovered. And those are the folks who are then going to run for Congress. And you miss a chance to get them early and to see what they're doing.
And this is probably a ridiculous question, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it anyway. A typical day for a regional reporter looks like what?
Looks like unlike any other day, because you don't know what's happening. You sit there and you figure, okay, there's a press conference at 11 o'clock, so I'm going to go cover the press conference because it's my local guys on there. And then there's a bill that I'm covering because one of my guys is sponsoring it, so that's at 2 o'clock. And then all of a sudden I get a phone call. I should go to the White House at 4 because one of the lawmakers I'm covering is switching parties with Donald Trump in the Oval Office. Okay? You don't totally expect it. So everything else gets scrapped because that's the biggest story of the day. And then at 7 o'clock, the president's holding a press conference and he is going after the governor of the state I cover. So now it's 8, 9 o'clock. I'm still working and very little that I plan to do all day.
Okay, a quick reminder for our listeners to keep up with the latest in communications strategy and training. Sign up for the Communications Community Newsletter. As a C-Suite Blueprint Radio listener, you get a special deal. Subscribe to the Communications Community, and you'll get a free ebook copy of my new book, Reporters Don't Hate You, 100 plus amazing media relations strategies. Just go to the bottom of this post on the C-Suite Blueprint blog. Join the community today, and you get a free book in the bargain. Back now with Jonathan Salant of the Regional Reporters Association. Jonathan, Tribune Publishing recently shuttered newsrooms at 5 of its papers, including major dailies like the New York Daily News, the Orlando Sentinel. From your perspective as head of the Regional Reporters Association, what does that mean for the news industry?
Well, ironically, that affects us the least, because we're not in newsrooms. We have a newsroom in Woodbridge, New Jersey. That's shuttered because of the pandemic. We have a newsroom in Trenton, the state capital. That's shuttered because of the pandemic. But I never had a newsroom. I was down here when I got hired for this job. I was told I was working by myself. The thing you miss, though, you miss the give and take of other reporters. You miss the chance of advice. You miss sitting down with the editor and having him working over your story. It doesn't work the same online. You miss I hate to call it locker room gossip because that has a bad connotation, especially since 2016. But just talking to other folks who might know something. My favorite regional story is I'm sitting in the speaker's lobby in Washington. It's closed now because of coronavirus, but outside the House the House floor, you can request to talk to any lawmaker you want. They don't always come out, but you can do really face-to-face stuff. And a lot of us spend a lot of time there. I'm going into running to a fellow regional reporter who worked for the Oklahoma papers. And he's all excise because the lawmaker he's covering gets this government accountability report, government accountability office. That's the investigative arm of Congress that says the Pentagon's about to bring back this dangerous chemical and store it in 2 Army depots, none of which have the protection to make sure that it doesn't leak out or get stolen. And of course, one of them is Oklahoma. The other one is near the area I'm covering. And I see him say, oh, you should look at this report. It mentions your area. And it's a great story for me. But because you have this camaraderie, because you see these people every day, you get a chance to pick up a story like that. And if you're not in the newsroom and you're not at the Capitol and you're at home, you don't get that give and take. And that's the real problem.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of our listeners are communicators who deal with reporters day in, day out. So let me ask you, Jonathan, what do the good, in quotes, communicators understand when dealing with regional reporters?
They understand what we do for a living. I don't want 5 emails, one a day for a week, asking me if I'm interested in talking to the mayor of Gary, Indiana, because they did some issue. Gary, Indiana is nowhere near Trenton, New Jersey. 80 goes, so you could actually take 80 from Bergen County and to go straight shot. But other than that, there's no connection between the 2 of them. So I don't care. I don't care what's happening in Salt Lake City or in Austin, Texas. And so I don't want to hear those emails. And if they send it to me because they do a bulk mailing, okay, I can delete it. But then they follow it up. It doesn't take long to look my name up on LinkedIn or on Google or on a million other sites, Muck Rack or all these other places that tells you what I do for a living. I cover the federal government that affects New Jersey. And so if it's a New Jersey issue, of course I'm interested. If it's an issue that, even if it's a lot of states, but New Jersey's one of them, it's a good story. But I don't care what's happening. I care as an American, and I care as a intelligent consumer of news myself. But I don't need to ask my reaction and get all these things. Fred Smith can talk about the violence in Chicago, and then I get follow-ups. Well, yeah, I know there's violence in Chicago, but Chicago's not in New Jersey. Again, you can still take 80 and get there, or 90. Well, 90 doesn't go through Jersey, but where off the George, but it goes through north of Jersey. But 80 could take you into there from Jersey. But again, it doesn't affect me. It's not my job. And I get all these calls. The other one is the most annoying. And occasionally, I'm from New York, so we can be swarmy occasionally. I get these emails saying, well, such and such wrote this op-ed piece for our competition. Would you like to interview him about it? And my first rule of journalism is I don't need it first, but I don't want it second. And the last thing I want to do, even less than writing about Gary, Indiana, is interviewing somebody about something they gave to somebody else. And I said, we're the largest news organization in New Jersey. I said, if you want to reach the people in New Jersey, you talk to me. I'm not interested if you want to talk to somebody else. Then they can have that story. We're not interested.
Jonathan, give us 1 or 2 ideas that communicators and more broadly news consumers can undertake to support local news outlets.
Well, one of them is subscribing. And we're now we're seeking voluntary subscriptions to us. A lot of other groups have voluntary subscriptions, or they have paywalls, so you subscribe to the news organization. That's the biggest thing. You used to go to the store and plunk down $0.25 for the newspaper. Now you can get it for free online, but they still got to make money. And advertising is nowhere near what it used to be. It's migrated online, but pennies on the $1 million. So when news organizations are asking for subscriptions, that's the biggest way to support the news organization. And also, it doesn't hurt to buy the paper either. They do sell them. And you can go to the 7-Eleven or the Wawa or the Sheets or any of the other convenience stores or the supermarket and get the paper. And sometimes, I still go. I get the Post delivered every day. I get the New York Times delivered on Sundays. I still pick up the newspapers from time to time, other newspapers. Wi-Fi doesn't work well on the subway, which I used to go to work on. Even though people are reading everything on their phones, I find it hard to get some of the Wi-Fi. So I'd rather have the print product anyway. And you stand up, let's strap hangers and you read the paper. It's just like the old days. But more importantly, it's just, buy. So you're a consumer, you pay for other things. You pay for cable, you pay for food, you pay for entertainment. This is something I think worth paying for.
Pay for news too, absolutely. Jonathan, what's the best way for listeners to get in touch with you and learn more about regional reporters and the association?
Well, we have a website, www.rra.org, which could be a better website, frankly, but work on it. And myself, it's initial J, last name S as in Stanley, ALANT as in Thomas at NJ Advance at cemedia.com, my work email. And also, communicators who have story ideas. One of my rules of life is I can't turn down a story I don't know about. I'd rather have you send me 100 emails that you think might be relevant to me than send me 99 and then don't send the one I want. There's a delete button on the computer. It's really easy. But I'd much rather have people suggest. But again, do the work first and think of something that might be relevant to me. Gary, Indiana is not, frankly. But there are stories, and I get stories all the time that are good stories or interesting stories because they have a relevance to the area I cover. And frankly, a lot of it is from people who represent, groups, represent individuals who are saying, hey, this, this is going through the committee that your guy is on, or your woman is on, the lawmaker you cover is on. So you may want to take a look at it. Sometimes it can be a really good story.
Good advice. And thanks to Jonathan Salant, Washington correspondent for New Jersey Advance Media and president of the Regional Reporters Association, for joining us today on C-Suite Blueprint Radio. This is Ed Barks. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to C-Suite Blueprint Radio with Ed Barks. Check out the show notes on the C-Suite Blueprint blog. While you're there, comment on this episode by sharing your thoughts in the Leave a Reply box. To learn how Ed can help you reach your business and public policy goals, visit barkscom.com. That's BARKSCOMM.com. Tune in again soon here on C-Suite Blueprint Radio.